All right, welcome everybody. We're back again to talk about another spiritual practice and that we'd like to dissect, demystify, and make it easy for you to adopt. So I have my friend Katie Kibbe here with me, and I wanted to talk to her about something specific that I've learned from her. So before we get into that, could you just tell a bit about yourself and where you're from and what you do?
I can. Thank you for having me. I am very excited about this. And you are going to find that I am a little bit passionate when it comes to talking about this topic in particular. But I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I am a writer and a speaker. And occasionally I help other writers develop their business in their writing businesses. But most primarily, I like to help women engage more deeply in their Christian faith. And so, what that looks like, sometimes I create written materials for them to gather around the table and discuss their faith with other women. I've created an Advent podcast that you can listen to. It's very small, bite-sized nuggets for you to take and to ponder on every day of Advent. So next year, when Advent rolls around, you might want to listen to that. You could also listen to it any day of the year. And what else do I have? I have a guided journal that we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Awesome. Sounds like you're doing a lot. So before we dive into your particular sweet spot of spiritual practices, what would be your working definition of what a spiritual practice is?
I think of spiritual practices as being anything that we do that helps us connect with God. So for some people, it might be, practicing Lectio Divina, Bible study, just in my own religious background, I'm Catholic. And so praying the rosary is a spiritual practice that a lot of people really enjoy. The daily examen, praying the liturgy of the hours, going to mass, going out and doing a nature walk, or praying with scripture. Let me see. Pondering is one of my favorites, though.
Right. And that is what I want to talk to you about. So Katie introduced me to the idea of pondering as a spiritual practice. And so I wanted to just dive a little bit deeper and ask you some questions about that. So how did this begin for you? What was the it's not something I've heard of before. So I feel like it's a Katie Kibbe trademarked spiritual practice. So how did this begin, and what have you noticed as you've been practicing this? And maybe describe what it looks like.
So I have to back up a little bit to give the full story of what is pondering. And I have to agree with you. It's not one that I had heard of either. So I think of pondering as being the intentional process of paying attention to God. And how we do that is going to look a little bit different for each of us, but it is a way in which we can pay attention to the normal everyday practices of our daily lives and then recall them, strengthen those memories so that we can develop a deeper trust in God. And one thing about this spiritual practice is that I uncovered it in scripture. So the Gospel of Luke talks about Mary being a person who pondered. There are not very many other people in scripture that we think about or hear about as being pondering people. But Mary is described as pondering what this sort of greeting might be when the angel Gabriel comes to her. And then when the shepherds come from out of the field, she hears their story and she ponders these things in her heart. So I also think that, yes, she pondered the shepherd's story, but she also probably pondered not finding a room in the inn, giving birth on a floor, talking to her cousin Elizabeth in the middle of the night about what these miraculous boys are going to do. But she used a lens of love to interiorly process what was happening in her exterior life. So rather than being focused on the negativity and on the spiraling worries and anxieties, she chose instead to look at how God was moving in her everyday life.
That makes me think of the questions that spiritual directors ask. How do you see God moving in your life? And this pondering sounds like just paying attention to that.
I think so. I think that. So I think that it's the process of being intentional about that rather than letting it be this kind of haphazard something that we just stumble upon.
Right.
But trying to make it an intentional practice of paying attention to where God is moving and then strengthening those memories. So paying attention, but then doing a little bit of extra work of strengthening the memories so that that is what we hold on to when the stress and the strife of everyday life happens.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you suggest that we hang on to those things? What do we do then after we've noticed to make sure that they don't just disappear?
So yesterday when I was going out on a walk, I don't know why, but then, I don't know if this happens. I think this happens to other people, but in my own life, I tend to get stuck in kind of a spiral of worry, and I become very inwardly focused. And sometimes it's about nothing, and sometimes it's about pretty big things. Mm-hmm. Usually, my anxiety and my worry is about things that I cannot control, and there's nothing that I can do about it. So yesterday happened to be one where I was going on my walk and I was kind of inwardly focused. And this gentleman rode in front of me on his bike. And I could tell that he was like, I was paying attention to him because he was riding his bike and I was trying to keep the dog out of his way. But he connected eyes with me and he waved and I waved back. And then he yelled, "God bless you," as he rode away. And it kind of, woke me up to, oh my goodness gracious, God is here in this moment. And he inspired that man to speak to me and to bless me, this perfect stranger. How miraculous is that? And so as I continued on my walk, I tried to really recapture in my imagination what the man looked like, what I felt like, just really to embody the experience. And I could keep doing this as I walked. So I could keep doing this as I was doing, something else. Because I'm still, kind of in my mind. I turned off the book I was listening to and captured it in my imagination. So it's something that I can revisit. And even now, going back and thinking about that man's beard and his bike helmet and his coat and his grin on his face, it really does. It makes me so happy. And it's such a sweet, sweet thing to be able to go back to that rather than maybe the 5 minutes prior to that. And instead of revisiting the 5 minutes prior to that, where I was stuck inside my head and I was anxious and I had the worries that I couldn't control. Why not go back and revisit the God bless you moments of the day?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like an experience of knowing that God sees you. He knows what's happening in your mind at that moment when you're walking. And he wants you to change your focus, to come to more calm And so he's reaching out to you through that man. Um, yeah, so you're seen. And you described it before as God leaving breadcrumbs for you during the day.
Yes.
And you gather them up and then ponder them, just like you've described. I love that.
Right. And I think that at first, when you first start doing it, you might just have one or two breadcrumbs that you're pondering. That's fine. But as the time goes on and the more that you pay attention, and sometimes it might be that you need to write these things down and keep a list of the ways in which, and not exactly that it's a gratitude list, but a list of the times in which you want to go back and revisit in your memory, these memories that you want to solidify so that you can revisit them, positive memories of God breaking through the mist and the mystery of kind of everyday life. But as time goes on, that pile of breadcrumbs kind of grows bigger and bigger, and it's easier to follow that and to find them in everyday life and to mark them off rather than to be distracted by all of the worries, because I find that when I can get distracted by my worries and my anxieties, that I miss so much of what God is wanting to show me and to reveal to me.
Yeah.
For instance, I think that Mary could very easily have told the shepherds to go away.
Yeah.
And it would have been within, her whatever cultural and societal norms to say, don't come visit this baby so early. Don't come in and see my hovel of a cave or a stable or wherever it is that Mary gave birth to Jesus. Instead, she was open and she was hospitable and she was welcoming. And in return, she listened and paid attention and gotten more news of miraculous occurrences. And so how often, are we missing what God is wanting to reveal because we don't have a practice baked in to help us pay attention?
Right. And it sounds like once we start this process, it's like our senses are tuned better as we go along, so that we notice more and more of how God comes into our lives.
I like that idea, tuning our senses to the transcendent, so that we are looking for, that we are sensitive to the truth and the beauty and the goodness, and not as much this truth that I have made, or this beauty that I have made, or this goodness that that is, my own goodness, but it's God's. And what God has already put into the world that I am not noticing.
Right. So if I'm brand new to this, you're saying, start with paying attention. Is there some process that we go through that would help someone to start this?
Yes, I think so. And I think this is a little bit counterintuitive because it is, it's a little kind of, I think that it is, it's practical. So if you want to start doing this practice, you can begin by noticing your surroundings. Setting aside a time, even if it's just 3 to 5 minutes, where all you're going to do is you're going to notice. You can look for ways in which God is breaking through in truth, in beauty, and in goodness, but in your surroundings, and paying attention to what is right around you. So, for instance, in the room that I am in, I would pay attention to what is all around me. So the baskets on the wall were created by women in Africa.
Mm.
and the beauty that God has put into the natural plants that they used, the dyes that they used, and the talents that they used. Okay, so that could be a whole 5 minutes of paying attention to that. I could spend time paying attention to the color on my walls, how it makes me feel,
Mm.
how amazing it is that God has imbued this world with so many different colors and that our body responds to color.
Mhm.
Like that in and of itself, I think is something worth pondering.
Right.
So setting aside a little bit of time to notice what is right around you. And then later in the day, going back and revisiting the experience and kind of training your brain to know I'm paying attention now because I'm going to come back and revisit this later. So I really need to know all of the details of what is right here because I'm going to come back to, I'm going to quiz myself later. And it's kind of, I find this a little bit challenging because I can get so distracted in all the stuff of the everyday that I'm like, oh, hold on. What was I pondering this morning? So I have to write it down.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
I love that it's like it's very real life. It's where you are presently that you can start pondering. It's not like you have to set up a prayer closet or a, special chair that you sit in and do this. It's just like going about your everyday life
mhm.
and seeing how God is meeting you in that, and then taking that and making it part of yourself, like almost ingesting those experiences. Somebody, one author talks about savoring. It sounds like that's what you're doing. You're savoring those moments, even if it's like creating that picture in your mind that you can go back to later. And then, yeah. So that, what do all these moments added up? What does that do for you? What does that tell you about God or yourself? Like, when you ponder, what's the benefit?
So the benefit for me is a deeper sense of peace and trust in his presence.
Mm.
And it also helps me to be in relationship with other people.
Mm.
Because I am, and I am by no means perfect in this at all. I am still very much a practitioner. So I am practicing and I am working. But as I am doing the practice of trying to find God in the natural world, I'm also seeking him inside of other people.
Mhm.
So when I do this and do this well, then I find that I can listen with more patience and without an attempt to try to change the other person.
Wow.
I listen with an attempt to understand
Mhm.
because I'm trying to seek God within them rather than get them to conform to my idea of what I think that they should be doing or what I think God thinks they should be doing.
Right.
Um, it,
Wow.
it also helps me to hold my tongue
Mhm.
because I'm, as Mary shows us, she did not speak a whole lot. She listened a whole lot,
Mhm.
but her presence made a difference. And I think that we discount our own presence. And so how can we, what practice can we do? I find pondering helps me, but there's any myriad of practices that might match better with our, our viewers' personalities.
Right.
So find the real goal is to find the practice that helps you to connect with God. And so if pondering works, or even if you could just take a little snippet of pondering here and, some breath prayer there and putting it all together in a way that helps you to feel as though you are able to really just embody his presence so that you can be his presence to someone else.
Mm. Right. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, because don't we need that kind of spirit in our relationships these days, that we are looking for the divine in the other, and not trying to change them or or trying to prove that we're right. Just connecting on that level. So yeah, I love that. So for those just starting, any tips on how to be consistent, or is that an unrealistic goal to set for ourselves?
I think consistency is really hard. I
Mm.
am the probably most consistent, inconsistent person there is. I have dropped out of more Bible studies than I care to admit, and then ended up starting to write some of my own. So your inconsistency today does not predict inconsistency in the future. What we need to find is something that feels most like ourselves, but we have to practice it for a little while so that it can become, so that we can kind of get used to it and figure out how it works with our schedule and with our personality. So, what I would recommend doing that I have found has worked with me with pondering and with other spiritual practices is to be very realistic about my life, my schedule, and my interest level. And to, if I become curious about a practice, then I will set an appointment with a time and a day that I am going to do this practice.
Mm.
I'll set it like for 2 weeks. I will attempt this practice, and then I'll go back and revisit it at the end of 2 weeks to see how I did.
Mm.
And then if I didn't ever do it, if I thought it was a great idea, somebody tells me, okay, perfect example, pray the liturgy of the hours. Super curious about this. It's just a set of prayers, different Bible readings and different quotes from saints that you would read throughout the day over the course of a month or a year. I was super curious about this. So I said, okay, I'm going to see if I can incorporate this practice into my life. So I set the time, I set the day, I started to do it, and it felt very overwhelming.
Mm.
And that's to be expected when you're trying something new.
Right.
Over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, I found I was not very successful. I did not pray the hours in the way that it was described that I should be doing it. So I revisited it and thought, okay, well, is there a part of this that I could do? Maybe I was biting off too much.
Mm.
So I took one part and then adjusted my practice going forward to do the little bit instead of trying to do so much.
Right.
And then over time, it became more natural and felt more like me. So just paying attention to yourself, starting small, but revisiting it and not quitting without revisiting it and knowing why did I quit and what else, what other way could I be doing this?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important that, and you're indicating this, but for us to all recognize not every practice is for everyone or
Amen.
for every time, anytime. Like there are seasons for things. Like, think back to when we're new moms. We have no time to like pray the hours or to, do examine every day, every evening. Like we just fall into bed and asleep immediately. So there's no pressure to perform in these things. That's not the aim. The aim, like you said, was just to connect with God. And as we make that effort to draw near to God, he's going to draw near to us, no matter how imperfectly we do it. Or if we're changing every week the practice that we're doing, it doesn't necessarily hinge on our consistency at all. So
I think the main thing is that you're doing something.
right.
And that that you trust that God is still present and that he loves you and that he's paying attention, and that you can find some way to return your gaze to him so that y'all lock eyes and so that you have a sense of your belovedness and just the miracle that your life is. I think it's very hard to remember that in the midst of everything else that we're expected to do in a day. And so, what is the one practice that you could do today for 5 minutes that would help you to reconnect with your creator, the one who loves you the most, and the one who is just absolutely enthralled with the fact that you are up and alive and breathing and able to interact with other people. So
Mhm. That's a good word, Katie. Thank you for that. So I'm going to link to your resources
thank you.
in the notes. And is there one that you would suggest that we start with?
I would love for everybody to buy 5 of these. Just kidding. Buy one. Try it out. It's available on Amazon and it's called Pondering, a Guided Journal. And I created it exactly for the person who is really busy and needs to pause and gain perspective and is interested in thinking deeply with God, who is kind of tired of living a superficial life and just skating along the surface, but they are ready to invest a little bit of time and connect with their heart. It is filled with some quotes. It's filled with some questions, and it does not take, you can give as little or as much time as you want. But it's available on Amazon, and I would be thrilled if you picked it up and then let me know what you think about it.
Yeah, it is a wonderful resource. I'm using it myself. And so thank you for creating that for us and leading us deeper into those areas. And I think that's so, it's so needed. We need that. We need to slow down. We need to consider our lives in relation to God. And that's when we can live out of who we were created to be. Once we make that connection with God. And anyway, yes, thank you. Thank you for telling us all about Pondering. And
You.
yeah, have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.